Tere, ladies and gentlemen, and dear bus lovers, it's really an honor for me to be here and also a great pleasure and to participate in this conference. But I'm not alone, actually. We have Darius from Russia is here, and also the team here from Estonia is here under Tarmo Aleman. You are somewhere in the audience with the sales and after-sales team. So we're very happy to be here. Scania, we have developed and produced heavy vehicles since more than 100 years. And yearly today we produce somewhere 75,000 trucks, 7,000 buses and 7,000 roughly industrial and marine engines. And but I thought I would not talk about so much about hardware, instead to talk about people and how we can make the life easier for a passenger from different viewpoints. You said it, Prit, but I repeat, my name is Klas Dahlberg and I'm head of buses and coaches globally for Scania. And I've been with the company since 1986, so you can regard me as a fossil now. But anyway, the great thing to work with buses and coaches is actually that we don't transport goods, we transport people. But those people, the passengers, they put demands on us. And you see some of the demands, and it has been mentioned many times today, and in fantastic ways, I should also say. Some of them are comfort, of course. You talked about that, Godson. Punctuality is something we also discussed. And safety, I think, is extremely important. If you allow me, I would like to make a small detour when it comes to sustainability. What do we mean by sustainability? Because there I think we have something interesting. For us, we see three challenges already here today at Scania, and that is, one is climate change. What does climate change mean to us? It means severe weather conditions. And these severe weather conditions cost society and the world a lot of money. And you know that is partly due to greenhouse gases, CO2, causing this. Another challenge is actually the fact that however much we can pump up from Saudi Arabia when it comes to oil and so on, somewhere there will be a peak. I mean, as far as I know, the earth is round, so there must be an end to it. And that when that end is coming closer, the cost of mineral fuels will, of course, also go up. So that is one challenge. And the third one is that already today more than 50% of the world's population, maybe not in Sweden and in Estonia, but the world's population live in cities, more than 50%. And we predict that 86% of the global GDP will come from those cities. But that also means that as we have a growing middle class in the developing countries, they start to buy cars instead of mopeds and bicycles and walk. Then we get very crowded cities. So that's the third challenge we have with the congestions in the cities. So is that just a problem, or do we see a solution? Well, I see a solution, or we do. And we used to joke, we have this picture, I didn't bring it, but it's actually a dog with big green glasses. So we say, if you put on the green glasses, you will see the solution to this. And I believe one solution is the fact that we have to work more with alternative fuels that are not fossil. And it was mentioned already today about biogas, for instance, as one alternative. Another alternative is RME, RAPS, what's the English word for that? Well, RAPS, you know, Raps oil. That's a quiz. You can win a trip to Södertälje if you crack it. The third one is ethanol, bioethanol. And it was mentioned before that many times when we discussed this, it said, yeah, but then we compete with food. This is not the case. Today, if we look at ethanol alone, we have more golf courses in the world covering a bigger area than we do growing ethanol. So this is not the real challenge here. So we have to find and work with alternative fuels, and today we actually already have engines for all these fuels. Then there is another thing coming in, I think that was also mentioned, electrification. And it's interesting because sometimes you get the feeling that that will solve everything. But I think you said it, Robert, that how do you carry the batteries around? Because I just said that the good thing about bus and coach is that we transport people. And if we talk about batteries, then we would transport batteries instead, and that won't bring much. So somehow we have to find a combination of the two, I think. And of course, all of you have heard about some type of hybridization. And if we combine that with alternative fuels, I think we can have a fantastic future when it comes to drivelines. And we talk a lot about modularization, and we believe in having a modular system for combustion engines, electrical engines, and battery packs. And depending on where you drive and the distances, you can combine these three. But you talked a lot about, economy and how do we earn money. And we shouldn't be foolish here. We should let the technique mature before we use it too much. Because this is not a competition in being, with haute couture when you have new clothes every year. This is about having a sustainable system. By the way, I don't know if it's allowed, but if you have any objections, please shoot. The third thing, don't shoot me, shoot the question. The third thing is actually about congestion in cities. We believe there is a very, simple way of solving that, and that is BRT systems in different ways. Can be very advanced and can be not so advanced. You mentioned also, even in Karlstad, you are looking into having some type of lane. And I think the trick by this is that when cities talk about developing trains, no one would ever think about the fact that you would put the train exactly on the road where the car is driving. You would always put the train on a separate lane. So why don't you put the bus on a separate lane? The thing you have is that you have a much lower investment doing that by just building a road, let's say. And this is kind of interesting. And the funny thing is also that many of the developing countries are far ahead of us, for instance, in Europe when it comes to these systems. Because it's fast, it's cheap, and it works. So that's nice. So there I see the solution to this sustainability. And why do I talk about that? Because I think it was actually the CEO of TNT meeting our CEO at Scania. He said that this is not us choosing if we should take care of the environment or not, because everyone will demand this. The younger generation will not buy that we drive around with buses or even trucks polluting the air. So that's one reason for really taking that seriously. And we do. We spend a lot of money in research and development. Then coming back to the dear passenger, somehow, even though we don't have the direct contact as many of you operators have, we have to listen and understand the needs of the passengers. But we also need to work very close to the operator. We have to understand what is keeping the operator awake at night. And one way of doing that, I believe, is that we have to form a partnership with the operator. We cannot have only discussing prices with each other. We have to understand more about our mutual business. And that goes also when it comes to, let's say, what is our delivery to the operator. We have to provide the highest uptime. And you all understand what I mean with uptime. Downtime is when the vehicle is not running due to some failure. So we have to provide uptime. And of course, LCC, what is that? Sounds like a rock band, but it's life cycle cost. And we have to provide the lowest possible life cycle cost. And what's in that? That's repair and maintenance. It's the fuel consumption of the vehicle. These are the things we are struggling with our research and development to keep that as low as possible. Sorry for running here back and forth. I bring the notes instead. Then we have a business model for this. And we have symbolized it as a scale. On the one side of the scale, we have the operator. On the other side, we have us, Scania. And in this partnership, now we come back to the understanding. We have to understand what is driving the income for an operator. What are the drivers? But also, what costs do you have? And my favorite example is actually if you have a bus in Karlstad standing still because of a small button is not working, the cost for you to put in a replacement bus, a replacement driver, is way above the cost of this little button there. And this is something we have to understand, that is driving cost. And that is what this scale is symbolizing. And we believe that the only way for us to be successful is if we can maximize the customer's EBIT. Otherwise, why should you work with us? Of course, we're extremely nice, but apart from that. So that's this one. The next thing is that we should remember to have a holistic view. And you can write this triangle in many ways, but usually we operate in the lower part, meaning that Scania has a relationship to the operator. And we try to find solutions for the operator. But as we said many times today, it's also essential that we understand how is the everyday life of a passenger. What is triggering them and what is not triggering them. But do we know that? Sitting in Södertälje, in our headquarters, what the passenger is feeling? Or how can we know this? And then I come to the next point, that is that we have, since a couple of years, started something we call the Scania Transport Laboratory. And that is a separate company. And there we have 25 trucks running. And we also have some of our competitors' vehicles. And what they do is they transport goods from our factories in Europe up to Södertälje. And that way we get an insight in how are these trucks operating. How is the service along the way? If a truck breaks down in, I don't know where, in Hamburg, how do we take care of this truck? And they run on commercial, how do you say? We pay for that service, so to say. And the reason for this is not that we want to compete with our customer. The reason for this is that we want to understand about the operation. And what we have done now since 3 years now is to do the same thing but with a bus lane or a bus operation. So we have now 6 coaches that are running from Stockholm to our headquarters in Södertälje. It's a distance of 30 kilometers. And the thing is that when we started this, we started with 2 coaches, and we said, yeah, maybe no one is interested in riding with this. It's like this, you buy a monthly card for this. And it's not about earning money, so I think it costs 200 or 300 Swedish crowns, 20, 30 euros. But the thing is that this became extremely popular. So all the youngsters, young engineers living in Stockholm, they said, some of them even said, why do I need a car? So some of them handed in their company car because they said, this is perfect. This bus is just outside my door. It runs 3 times in the morning, 3 times in the evening, so problem solved. And the good thing for us is we have a bi-monthly meeting also internally where we look into how are these buses performing? Is everything okay? How is the service? Do they get help if something happens? And of course also what are the passengers saying? Do they like it? Do they hear a noise somewhere? Or how do they react to this? And again, I have to stress that this is not about competing with you guys in the industry. And I can assure you we're not half as good as you are. This is more about us learning about the operation. And we believe, and I think all of us sitting here talking about bus lovers, that increased bus transportation is profitable for the passenger. We talked a lot about how much can it cost and so on and so forth. But imagine if you leave your car at home, how much money do you save as an individual then? And it's profitable for the operators and the community too. And we have a name for this. We call it moving people, changing minds. And that's actually the end of my presentation. So,
thank you. It was so warm and positive. But still I have a question. How do you make sure what comforts do the passengers love in the bus? There should, I guess, be some tests you perform on people.
Yeah, we do.
What kind of tests?
What they love about the bus. Well, actually, we do have, well, let's say like this, we have almost 3,000 people in Södertälje committed to research and development. And a large part of research and development is actually dedicated to the driveline as such, both for trucks and buses. And what I didn't mention when I talked about sustainability is that, you know, we have this new legislation in Europe for Euro 6. That means with Euro 6 that now the emissions are extremely low, let's say on a local basis, NOx and so on. And to do this, we have spent a lot of money in research and development. But coming back to your question about comfort for the passenger, well, what we do is we have a test track, because it starts, I would say, with the chassis and how, let's say, vibrations go into the body. And actually, one of the bodies we use is the Irisar body. So I think you can also confirm, Gods, on that. A lot is depending on the chassis and the comfort of the chassis. And if we do that right, you can build the right body on that chassis. No.
What about future? Is there the best chance of survival for diesel engines, hybrid engines, or electric engines? What kind of engine will win in 10-15 years?
Yeah, I think diesel will, of course, there is nothing, of course, in this life. But I think diesel will probably be dominant in many of the developing countries. We also see they don't have, as we have in Europe, the Euro 6 norm. Some of the countries don't even have a norm. They have very bad fuel, I should say, also diesel with very high sulfur, which you cannot use in a modern engine because you destroy it. But as I said before, I think what we see in front of us is a combination of electric and combustion engine. but not necessarily a combustion engine running on diesel, actually. I believe in, and we believe in, the alternative fuels, as I mentioned.
Küsimusi saalist? Yes, there is a question.
Maybe I should have.
I remember several years ago, Scania was first who introduced fuel cells technology. What happened? Why till now it not works?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we are early in the development. This was more like a test. And today, I mean, the important thing with these solutions, they have to be, economical viable, and that was not. But we managed to do it. I mean, we had it working, but it was not possible to do it on a larger scale. But who knows, maybe it... I actually should... one of our people working with this has this picture of a plate truck, and then you can see there is a funnel, and someone is pouring water into it, and it should run. And maybe we will get there someday, but we're not there today, actually. More questions?
Hi, you mentioned earlier the life cycle cost.
Yes.
And you mentioned two costs: the fuel cost and the
repair and maintenance
maintenance costs. How about capital costs?
It's also a part of that, of course. And the capital cost, and it's good you mention it, is also related to the residual value of the vehicle, of course. So this is connected. And let's say the better we get, the higher residual value we can achieve for the vehicles we produce. So this is very important, also the second and third life of a vehicle. But you're right, it's an important part of the total cost. But it was also mentioned the total cost of the operation. Of course, the driver is a very big part, depending, of course, where you are in the world. But I think drivers, and it was mentioned, plays a very important role in the operation, regardless if it's bus or truck. And we put a lot of effort in making life easier, someone said, for the driver. I think this is very crucial.
I'll go on from here a little bit. Gottson mentioned earlier that the buses should be used 4 or 5 years. You mentioned the second and third cycle. How does that, how to say, what do you mean under the second and third cycle?
I mean, depending on operation, some countries, let's say Turkey, they drive buses for 2-3 years, and then it passes on to a second user. That is the second life, and then maybe there is a third life.
So what do you consider how long Scania buses could be used in the public transportation?
Long. I say as they do. Was it Bentley that instead of putting how many horsepowers, they just put enough? But anyway, you will see operations reaching up to 15 years. And in Australia, I was there, this is 1 year ago now, but they drive 20 to 25 years with their vehicles. So this is a matter of maintenance and so on also, of course.
Do we have enough time?
This is the last question of yours.
The clock is already dead.
The clock switched off at all.
Okay, thanks.
Kas on, yeah.
How about Scania? Will it be a Swedish company in future, or will there be any changes?
There will, I think, most probably be changes, yes. And as you know, it's Volkswagen who made a bid on Scania to buy 90% or more of the shares. And to my knowledge now that they were missing, I think, 1.75%. And today I was reading it here. I was sneaking into Godson's iPad that now Alecta has decided to sell, which means they have then 90%. So I think on Friday then we know, but this is the case. But just not to elaborate too much on that, but you know we were the first distributor for Volkswagen in outside Germany. So we started to sell the Beetle, you know, in 1947, I think it was. So we have a very long relationship going back with Volkswagen. So, yeah, we will survive, as they say.
That's a nice message to hear.
At least I hope so.
I don't see any more hands. Or there is one. You are very popular.
My question connected to the concurrence in the free market. That okay, you mentioned that you are a Swedish company, but in this Europe market starting very well, a Chinese company or other companies. How you had you planned how you can plan to fight against the third-party company because they are cheaper than you and you spend a lot to development. But
it's a good question. I got it before also regarding Chinese or Asian makes, and I think it's let's say one thing is quality. That is one of our core values within Scania, quality. And as I think you mentioned, Godson, one city buying a certain make, and after 3 years something happened. So the next thing is about service, because I think service is very essential in our business of heavy transport. And there we have a clear advantage, I would say. We, together with many of our European colleagues, to have a service network in Europe and around the world that is outstanding, actually. But again, we should always, how do you say, treat everyone with respect. And we see Chinese makes coming into, let's say, Africa, many parts of the world. And we have seen it within passenger cars also. Remember when the Japanese came, I was looking at some old pictures there, and then today you realize, wow. But, I mean, be on top of things, then hopefully we will survive. Okay.
No, that seems to be all.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Aitäh!